Welcome back to the We Valiant Feud podcast. I am your host, Slapshot.
Crossfire's here.
Raptor's here.
And today we have a very hot amendment to discuss. We got the 12th Amendment on the line. And 12th Amendment, go! So I'll just kick right off into it with what is the 12th Amendment defined as? And as per our usual source for this one, we got the Cornell Law site. The 12th Amendment is stated as the electors shall meet in their respective states and vote by ballot for president and vice president, one of whom, at least, shall not be inhabitant of the same state with themselves. They shall name in their ballots the person voted for as president, and in distinct ballots the person voted for as vice president. And they shall make distinct lists of all persons voted for as president and of all persons voted for as vice president, and of the number of votes for each, which list they shall sign and certify and transmit sealed to the seat of the government of the United States, directed to the President of the Senate. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and House of Representatives, open all the certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be the president, if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have such majority, then from the persons having the highest numbers, not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the votes shall be taken by states. The representation from each state having 1 vote, a quorum for this purpose shall consist of a member or members from 2/3 of the states, and a majority of all the states shall be necessary to a choice. And if the House of Representatives shall not choose a president, whenever the right of choice shall devolve upon them, before the 4th day of March next following, then the vice president shall act as president, as in the case of the death or other constitutional disability of the president. The person having the greatest number of votes as vice president shall be the vice president, if such number by a majority of the whole number of electors appointed, and if no person have a majority, then from the 2 highest numbers on the list, the Senate shall choose the vice president. A quorum for the purpose shall consist of 2/3 of the whole number of senators, and a majority of the whole number shall be necessary to a choice. But no person constitutionally ineligible to the office of president shall be eligible to that of vice president of the United States.
Yeah, that was a mouthful.
That's an actual mouthful.
There's also a little side note here for the 20th Amendment, which has to do with the commencement of the terms of president, vice president, and members of Congress. Section 3 of that overwrites part of the 20th Amendment. Section 3 specifically says, if at any time fixed for the beginning of a term of the president-elect shall have died, the vice president-elect shall become president. If a president shall not have been chosen before the time fixed for the beginning of his term, or the president-elect shall have failed to qualify, then the vice president-elect shall act as president until a president shall have qualified. And the Congress may by law provide for the case wherein neither a president-elect nor vice president-elect shall qualify, declaring who shall then act as president, or the manner in which one who is to act shall be selected. And such persons shall act accordingly until a president or vice president shall have qualified. So it's kind of like a little bit of a side note.
So on another site that I have, it basically paraphrases what the 12th Amendment's full text is. The 12th Amendment came after the 1800 presidential election. It was adopted to fix a flaw in the Constitution that had allowed Thomas Jefferson to tie in the Electoral College with his vice presidential candidate, Aaron Burr. The election was then sent to the House of Representatives, which required 36 ballots to finally elect Jefferson president. So the 12th Amendment specifies that it's just specifying that electors shall cast distinct votes for the president and vice president rather than electoral votes for 2 men separate. why we have it set up as we do today. Still, it's when you cast your vote for for president, vice president, you're casting them for the both of them, not one president and then a separate vote for a vice president.
Well, back then the vice president was if you lost the election, then you were the vice president.
Yeah, that was
right.
I think that was one of the biggest glaring problems with this particular system is that you could have you actually almost always had president and vice president from different parties. So
it wouldn't necessarily be a flaw, but I think it's definitely not ideal, I guess. Or it could be ideal because that would kind of maintain the integrity of like the middle.
Yeah, that's the interesting bit, because like you could look at it two ways, because like you could look at it that way where, like you said, you have both sides that are both major sides, captured by it, but at the same time I was thinking of like the impact on cooperation between them. Imagine now if we had one party as the president and another party as the vice president, it would be like a constant war every single day, even more than it normally is.
This is true, but they would also have to. I mean, obviously now it's different, but
we probably
throughout history they would have to work together, and maybe that could have been something that prevented where the country is currently. I
was just going to say that too. That in itself may have been something that caused it to not be this way. I was going to say that. So. Interesting way to look at it. There's also another thing too in there that I noticed that I don't remember exactly which amendment fixed this or not, but did you notice it says March 4th? That used to be the date when the president took office, was March 4th instead of January 20th.
When did that change?
I do not know when that changed.
Also to mention, before we move forward with the podcast, we're actually doing things a little bit differently this episode. We decided to test the waters with technology, and we're all recording separately from our own dwellings. So, if there's any little glitches in the recording, I guess that's something to note for any listeners.
Yeah, or you can just bully us. That's fine.
Yeah, join. Oh wait, yeah, you can actually just join our Discord and make fun of us.
Yeah, the Discord we're recording on. Yeah. So it says the 20th Amendment did not take effect until October 1933, after the long lame duck period, once again problematic. It says with the U.S. and was right after the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt had to wait 4 months to implement the New Deal, and then it served January 20th was served as inauguration day on Roosevelt's second term.
So let's talk about why it's important today, because I also kind of want to touch on FDR because he's a special case in and of himself.
Yeah. Well, why it's important? President. I think we wrapped up why electing the president's important.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, it's the face of the country. There's really nothing else to explain about that.
I mean, you can dig into the nuances about like what each of the things do. But I mean, it basically just lays out systematically between the 12th Amendment here and then the little excerpt from the 20th Amendment. It systematically lays out how to elect the president. I mean, this unlike a lot of the other ones we have went through, this one here basically is
word for word.
I'd say like a mechanical amendment more than the other ones that are kind of symbolic. This one here basically lays out all the devices for how to elect the president, as well as some contingencies that are built in should one of the previous layers not work.
What's kind of crazy to me is, I mean, this amendment itself is kind of long, but in the grand scheme of things, whenever you're talking about like how our government is run, this like 2 or 3 paragraph thing basically just explains how our election is run and how it should be run.
Yeah, it seems like things were done quite a bit more simply back then. So I think that wraps up why it's important. I don't really have anything else to add on that part.
Of course, it was done much like very simply. I mean, they didn't have as many states back then either, and didn't have technology. I mean, how do you think they did absentee ballots? They probably did carrier pigeon ballots.
I don't even think they had carrier pigeons at that time.
I don't even know if they had absentee back then.
I don't think so either.
They definitely didn't. They definitely didn't.
Yeah. I think back then, I even now looking at this system, which was designed for it back then with a very few number of states compared to what we have now. I think the system still has really solid grounding. I mean, like, it makes sense. And back then,
Yeah.
a lot of the actual electors served a very literal purpose. You'd select, or you'd go through the state having its own election, which is still how we do it. Each state has their own election, and then they pick the electors to go pick the final the candidates. Like that's part of the representative democracy thing, and part of the republic. But back then, it was a lot more literal because they actually had to physically send people from to Washington because there was you can't just pick up the phone and call. So this was definitely had a more literal purpose.
And also, if I'm correct somewhat, I believe the Electoral College, especially in this day and age, it gives states more rural areas a bigger voice. Whereas if we're going by popular votes, we have lots of people living in these
tiny condensed areas.
Coastal regions.
Right, such as larger cities like LA, Chicago, and so on. And they can have a lot of weight, whereas with the Electoral College, you're giving the suburbs and rural areas a bigger voice.
Yeah, because otherwise you have you have cities like New York City, for instance, is like 3% of the entire U.S. population, approximately.
And how much percentage of the population lives in New York that actually lives in New York State?
I think, like I said, I think it's 3%.
I honestly don't even know how you know that number, right off the top of your head. Props to you for that.
Yeah, deep. It's a dark place. But so you have that many people that live in one area. There's no way that they're going to have an accurate say on somebody that lives in the middle of Nebraska. So this is set up to try to normalize the vote. Like the Electoral College itself is set up to normalize the weight of each vote because each state gets 2 votes regardless, and then the other ones are assigned based on population. So it's important to have that balanced out so that each state has some bit of equal representation, which is the point you were saying, which is why nowadays the Electoral College is extremely important.
Absolutely.
Otherwise you get California and New York deciding everything for the entire country.
Yeah, that's why the popular vote isn't over the Electoral College. That's why the Electoral College still exists over the popular vote. And I know there was some hot debate, and maybe still is, over people think that the Electoral College is out of date, but in reality, we just explained why it exists, and it's even more prevalent today than before.
It is definitely still a hot debate.
The Electoral College is incredibly important, more important than. Honestly, it's one of the most important things in our Constitution.
Yeah, because otherwise little states will never have any chance in saying anything. And I know, like you were saying, people like to, I use the phrase fantasize about abolishing the Electoral College, but you'd have to write an amendment for that since the Electoral College is defined in the Constitution, and for it to become a real amendment, all states would have to ratify it. So there's no chance. But that pops into another interesting thing is what happens when a result comes in that isn't widely approved. There's a contested result that the Electoral College can challenge that.
Explain.
So there's a possibility to overturn particular election results if there are various reasons why, and I think this also comes into play too. If they don't get a majority of the vote, I think the state can choose who the electors go to. I believe there's a mechanism written for that.
So I didn't look into the Electoral College this deep, but while doing my research before this podcast. Now, there's an elector for each county, right?
So it depends on where you live. There's electors assigned by, usually it's the representatives for the state. So they have the representative regions. So it's not particularly like a county or parish based thing. You have like I don't know if you just call them jurisdictions, whatever the person that like
geographical areas.
No, I mean that the geographical areas is a lot of it, but I mean like the actual physical regions set up for the people for the Congress people, whatever their jurisdictions are called, the districts. So there's congressional districts and per state, and then there's the senators that are for the state as well. So those are who make up the electors. In each state, Each state, of course, is different because you have the number of representatives per state, and then you have the senators per state. So I'll use Texas. So there's 38. So my understanding is that there's 36 representatives in Texas, and then you have the 2 senators. So those 36 represent the 36 congressional districts in Texas. Now there's state congressional districts, which are more like county or parish based, and then there is the full there's the federal jurisdictions, federal districts, which is where the electoral college comes in. But if something's wrong with the vote in a state, I know lately there's been lots of questions about the legitimacy of certain votes. The state can challenge the popular vote and send their electors to that are not in line with the popular vote of a state. If there's too much fraud, or if there's too much, there's too many inconsistencies or anything like that, then the state legislation can overrule where the electors go. That's a mechanism that's built into it.
Okay, so just did a little bit of legwork here. So how the electoral votes were assigned per state was each state appoints electors according to its legislature, equal in number to its congressional delegation. The congressional delegation of a state is the sum of its 2 senators plus all of its representatives.
Well, yeah, which is what I said earlier.
That's what he just said.
That's what I was saying. Like in California, in Texas, I was saying like there's 36 representatives, and then there's 2 senators, so that's 38. So how you get the 38 votes? California would have 53 representatives because the state's so big, and also because of population there, and then you have the 2 senators. So that's how you get 55. So yeah, what you just said.
Each state gets 2 senators, and then however many representatives they get based on population.
I think it's 1 minimum per state, and then the rest is based on population. So I think Nebraska has 3, maybe something like that. A couple states have 3, so that means that they literally have 1 representative for the entire state.
That just and it's based on population, like we said.
Yeah. So like states with 3 electoral votes. Let's see here. Oh boy, DC. That's surprising. Alaska has 3, so they have the 2 senators from Alaska, and then they have the one rep. Yeah, thanks. So the whole my page I was just watching just totally decided to yeet off. I don't know if you guys saw that or not. Okay, yeah, so there's a bunch of 3s here. North, South Dakota each have 3. So that's kind of highlighting that. Oh boy. So and that shows why it's important, and there's the contestant of that. But there's also another alternative too that could happen, is that a state doesn't assign electors. So if something happens again, I know this is like lately, like there's a lot of talk about this, that a state may possibly contest the results to the point where they do not assign electors, and then there's electors that are just kind of floating out there. So what ends up happening at that point is it falls back to the Supreme Court at that point. It would be the first step, and then the Supreme Court could then decide, or then throw it back to the state delegations, where then it goes into what I believe is just called a contingent election, and then from there each state has the ability to send 1 vote, which is similar to that original system that we'd highlighted when we were reading the definition. Each state would be able to send one vote determined by the state legislature, I think regardless of popular vote, and then all of those votes are who decides the president. And I think they have to do that for president, and then again for vice president. I think they're separate at that point.
So, I mean, did anything in the 20th Amendment change that as well, or?
Let me flip to the 20th Amendment here, because the 20th Amendment specifically has to do with the commencement of terms of president and whatnot. We were wondering when it changed from March 4th. Right here, 20th Amendment, Section 1, terms of president and vice president shall end at noon the 20th day of January. And it says in the terms of Senators Republicans, noon on the third day of January for the years in which terms would have ended. It says section 2, Congress shall assemble at least once per year. And such meeting shall begin on the third day of January unless by a law a different day. And then here's section 3. It says, if at the time fixed for the beginning term of the president-elect shall have died. So it basically goes through explaining so section 3 doesn't really change that. It just basically lays out what happens if the president-elect dies, or the president-elect or vice president-elect are not able to fill the term. This explains and outlines what that looks like. And then section 4, section 5, and section 6. So section 4 is about Congress. Let's see here. It talks about Congress. It just basically says the Congress made by law provide the case death of any persons from whom the representatives may choose a president whenever the right of choice should be devolved upon them. So that means if someone dies, if a president dies, they get to pick who takes over. And then section 5 says sections 1 and 2 shall take effect on the 15th day of October. So that was what we said about FDR in 1933. And then section 6 says article shall be inoperative unless it is ratified as an amendment to the Constitution by 3/4 of the several state legislatures within 7 years from the state of submission. So I guess we can basically call this podcast the 12th and 20th Amendments, since they both kind of tie together. And we'll just kind of get that one later because this has a direct tie to that.
Something I kind of just found funny. So in regards to FDR, since he served 4 terms, not 2, he served 4 terms because it was basically a coincidence of timing. Other presidents before him had tried at points to run for a 3rd term, but none of them succeeded. FDR, however, did, because during the time the Great Depression and World War II were going on. But what I kind of thought was funny was after FDR's, whenever he started his 4th term, it's here on historychannel.com. It says, eventually U.S. lawmakers pushed back, arguing that term limits were necessary to keep abuse of power in check. 2 years after FDR's death, Congress passed the 22nd Amendment, limiting presidents to 2 terms. Then the amendment, and that amendment was ratified in 1951, which I just kind of think is a funny anecdote because our current representatives don't seem to like the idea of term limits, but they want to impose them on other branches of government.
Yeah, I mean that basically. If you want, we can pull in the 22nd and 23rd Amendment as well in here, since these all tied directly together with the presidential terms and presidential election and stuff. Those 2 terms are super easy to talk about. If you guys want, we can.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because
we can start with the 23rd then.
Well, he was just saying the 22nd Amendment was what he was just saying that basically. I'll read these just in order. 22nd Amendment, Section 1 says no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice, and no person who has held the office of president or has acted president for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected president shall be elected to the office of the president more than once. So, if you are president, or if you're vice president, and the president dies a year into his term, you serve 3 years, you can't be elected more than twice. All right. It says they can't be elected more than once. It says, but this article shall not apply to any person holding the office of president when this article is proposed by Congress. It shall not prevent any person who may be holding office of the president or acting president during the term when this becomes operative from holding the office of president or acting as president during the remainder of such term. So that basically gave Truman a free card to run as many times as he wanted.
FDR, but
no, this was the 20. Oh wait, well, okay, so yeah, gave FDR a card to keep running forever, and then Truman too, since he was part of this. I don't think this was ratified until after FDR.
No, it was after he died.
Yeah, so this applied directly to Truman then. Although I only think he had one term. Yeah, he didn't run for another one, I don't think. But he could have. I don't think either he didn't choose to or he lost. I'd have to check on that in a second. But the short section 2 of the 22nd Amendment says this article shall be inoperative unless it's ratified. Yeah. So let me see the presidential election of that would be I think against Eisenhower, right? Let me quickly look at that real quick. Quickly look. So going back here, yeah. So the 1952 presidential election was between Eisenhower and Aldie Stevenson, which Eisenhower kind of crushed it a little bit. If you did Democrat Party, let's see. Yeah, so Harry Truman ran for another term. And Truman withdrew from that. So Truman's main opponent was populist Senator Estates Coifer, if that's how you pronounce it. I don't have any idea. Truman's weakness. It says nationally, Truman was a choice of only 36% Democrats. So it says Truman only had 18%, while the other guy led with 36%. And then he lost the New Hampshire primary. After that, Truman dropped out. So Truman was trying to run in 1952 against Eisenhower and Nixon, even though Truman won the 1948 presidential election, which was his first time running on his own, because he became president in 1945 after FDR passed away. Then he ran again in 1948, which, if the 22nd Amendment was stuck there and it only applied to FDR, he couldn't have ran again. But he did run again in 1952. He just wasn't good enough to beat his Democratic opponents. So,
which is kind of crazy to think about, like some weird alternate history, because if he could have just kept running and winning and
yeah, because the let's see, 22nd Amendment, when was that ratified? What do you what date? March 21st, 1947 is when it was ratified. So that was during that was almost at the end of the final bit of his term, which it specifically says here. It says this article shall not apply to any person holding the office of president when this article was proposed by Congress, and shall not holding office, and shall not prevent any person who may be holding the office of president or acting as president during the term when the article is operative. It literally applies. It's literally given him a free card, but he lost, so he couldn't run again. Although he could have ran again after that. Even if he lost, he could have just kept running, because this basically gave him a free card. Interesting concept.
There's also a couple other people that ran for a third term.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, Teddy Roosevelt, Ulysses S. Grant.
Back then, though, it was totally legal, because
Woodrow Wilson, Truman.
I didn't know Wilson tried.
Wilson was a very bad man.
Yeah, but so back then, that was totally legal to do that, because there was no thing. They just all followed the kind of
precedent that George Washington had set.
Thank you. That I could have said it better myself. So I mean, that basically followed the 22nd Amendment, and I know nowadays there's talks of trying to repeal that, but I don't really think that would ever happen, and I personally wouldn't want it to be repealed. I don't know about you guys.
No, I mean, yeah, we definitely need term limits. Like, regardless of how good a president is, that's what prevents one person. What basically prevents what happens in Russia right now.
It prevents
with Putin constantly winning elections over and over and over again, because they actually have stuff in their constitution that prevents that kind of stuff. But basically, Putin found a way around it. He ran as president, and then he was like the prime minister, and then he was president again or something.
Yep,
but basically,
that's correct, because him and Medvedev switched around. Did you see? And then they just they just approved to accept him as president until 2032, I think, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Oh, Jesus, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that was earlier this year.
Like, you want to talk about tyranny? There it is.
Yeah, so I mean, that pretty much wraps up the 22nd Amendment, because they wrote that in. That was the 100% targeted at FDR, because he kept running and running and running, and if he didn't die, he probably would have kept running again. You know, I mean, I'm just gonna assume that was the case. And then we wanted to hop into the 23rd Amendment really super quickly, because it just explains presidential electors for D.C. It says the district the district constituting the seat of government for the United States shall appoint in such manner as Congress may direct a number of electors of president and vice president equal to the whole number of senators and representatives in Congress to which the district would either be entitled if it were a state, but in no event more than the least populous state. They shall be in addition to those appointed by the states, but shall have been considered for the purposes of the election of president and vice president, to be of the electors appointed by a state, and they shall meet the district to perform such duties as provided with the 12th article of amendment. And then section 2 says Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So it basically just gives DC 3, and it basically is going to remain 3 because that's the minimum you can get with any state, and it said it shall not exceed that. But these are not full-time senators or representatives. They're just people that are electors that are appointed in turn to give DC some representation.
Right, because it's just a district. It's its own little space, technically, territory, whatever you want to call it.
I don't know how that one got passed into law.
I don't know either, especially since the Constitution, even before the amendment, says specifically that DC should not be a state at all. It should never be a state. Not that this is saying it's a state, but it's giving
the same power as a state.
Yeah, like DC technically is what, in Maryland?
Yeah.
So technically it should be, if anything, a representative district of Maryland.
Yeah.
Should be, but
I was surprised that they didn't actually do it that way. Like, that would make a lot more sense to me to have it, or a lot more sense to me to have it done that way.
But I guess I can see it the other way too, because DC is the seat of the entire government, and it just happens to sit in Maryland. That would may give Maryland like some kind of extra power. I don't know how, but I mean,
yeah, I mean that might actually be part of it, because if you had like the little, like you said, the little seat of the government, there might be some ability with that. I'm not 100% sure though.
I'm not entirely sure how it would. I mean, sure, you have everything going on with the government there, but like, you still have people there that reside there that are all entitled to their own vote and opinion. So I think that I don't know if it would really have any major weight on that.
Yeah, it might not. I mean, that was just for point of conversation. But I mean, that pretty much wraps up the 23rd Amendment. I mean, that one's just really simple. It's just basically saying, like, here you go. You have 3 electoral votes. Congrats. Your little ta-da party favor go off.
This really goes to show how much planning we go into this. We just kind of go down the list of amendments and just like, oh, you know what? As we start this podcast, you know what? Actually, like, these other 3 amendments kind of tie into this too.
Well, it's also a good way, like, because people can listen and hear us going through our process of learning about this stuff, because none, like we've said before, none of us are experts on this stuff. We just go out and do our own research, and that may help other people find the means to do their own research, because a lot of people will just sit there and listen to the news, and maybe they remember stuff from high school, but not everything. And like this way we can basically just show how we go through our process of um, re-educating ourselves.
So you could actually talk about the 24th Amendment, the 25th Amendment, and the 26th Amendment on this one, actually, too, because the 24th Amendment is the abolition of the poll tax qualifications in federal election. The 25th has to do with presidential vacancy, disability, or incapability, or basically incapacity. And then the 26th has to do with the reduction of voting age qualifications. So you could throw those in here because they all have to do with the election of the president. Because then
Are we just gonna chuck that in the bucket and just
can,
have at it?
Yeah, we can just.
They're all.
Might as well.
They're all very relevant.
All right, I'll read off the 24th Amendment then.
Yeah.
As per the Constitution, it just states that the right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representative in Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other tax. And this was ratified in 1962. I believe the House passed this, outlawing the poll tax as a voting requirement in federal elections, basically by a vote of 295 to 86. And at this time, 5 states maintained poll taxes, which disproportionately affected African American voters in Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas.
So what is poll tax? Because that's something I've never even heard of before.
Because we aren't from 1962, so we of course wouldn't know what that is.
So poll tax is a tax levied on every adult without reference to income or resources. So it says the poll tax is a fixed sum on every liable individual, although often associated with often considered or associated with former CSA states. It says
basically just sounds to me like it's a tax that was levied on people in states that if you didn't pay the tax, meaning like you weren't a certain age to pay tax or whatever, or you didn't make enough money to actually pay the tax,
you couldn't vote.
Then you couldn't vote, which
that's all it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's repeals here, and I have some stuff because it says poll taxes were issued in Alabama, Arkansas, California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Mississippi, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia, and Wisconsin. All these were repealed like in the 1914 is the lowest repeal I see, up to 1966, which I believe is when this was passed. And then they all ranged from $1 to $3 at the time. That's not adjusted for inflation. So like a $2 poll tax, they said equivalent was like $20. All right, getting back into it. We have the 25th and 26th Amendments that really kind of flow along with this here, but I guess we'll go in order and jump back to the 17th Amendment quick, because that has a lot to do with this too, where it's just a popular election of senators. This just says the Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. The electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors to the numerous branches of the state legislators. It says when vacancies happen in the representation of any state in the Senate, the executive authority of such state shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies, provided that the legislation of any state may empower the executive, therefore make temporary appointments until the people fill the vacancies by election, as the legislators may direct. And then it basically says this amendment is construed to affect any election or term of any senator chosen before it becomes valid as part of the Constitution. So that basically just says that the senators have to get a popular vote to get in. Like nothing really to talk about there. At least,
well, kind of to go into the electoral college thing too a little bit more, like why we have an electoral college for the president election, but not for like senator representative elections. And that kind of goes into why we are more of a republic, not a democracy. Because with a democracy, it's easy. Like a democracy is the popular vote. Like each person gets one vote, and it goes from there. It makes more sense to have smaller scale elections being a popular election because it's more conducive to the people that live there, rather than whenever we're talking about the president election, whenever we're talking about the massive landmass that is the United States, there's huge differences. So it would make sense for it to be more of a, or to use the republic system where there are electors given to each group.
Yeah,
given to each state.
Yeah, because this is part of the founding of the foundation that the Electoral College exists on, because senators are all part of the Electoral College, so that leads directly to it. So then after the 17th Amendment, I wanted to talk about the 25th and 26th Amendments, because these all have to do with voting, and this will pretty much just wrap up the rest of anything to do with the presidential elections. 25th Amendment, pretty long one, says presidential vacancy, disability, or an incapacity. So this just has to do with how things are taken over after or if the president can't do their job. So Section 1 says, in the case of the removal of the president from office or his death or resignation, the vice president shall become president. Pretty straightforward. Section 2, whenever there is a vacancy in the office of vice president, the president shall nominate a vice president who shall be taken upon office by confirmation of majority vote of both houses of Congress. So, president picks that. Although I thought that there was a succession line. Interesting. It says whenever,
as far as I'm aware, there's a succession line. Like
maybe that's
I don't think
down
it's.
Here.
Yeah.
Section 3, whenever the president transmits power or to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives has written the declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, and until he transmits them with a written declaration, and to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. So the president can't physically give it away; they'll determine it to be the case, and they'll take it away. Whenever the vice president and a majority of either principal officers of the executive department or such other body as Congress may by law provide transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. Therein, when the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives has written declaration that no inability exists, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office unless the vice president and a majority of either principal officers of the executive department or of such other body as Congress may law provide transmit within 4 days to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Thereupon Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. If the Congress within 21 days after receipt of the letter of written declaration, or Congress is not in session within 21 days after Congress is required to assemble, determined by 2/3 votes of both houses that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall continue to discharge as the same as acting president. Otherwise, the president shall resume the powers and duties of his office. So it basically just says that that they have to have 2/3 vote to vote the president out, and everybody has to agree on it. Otherwise, it won't happen.
The
I mean, that's
the first time the 25th Amendment was actually utilized was I believe, oh gosh, in 1973.
was that
I
with
believe.
Nixon?
With Nixon, yeah. Spiro Agnew, his vice president, was investigated, and for bribery and tax fraud, I believe, to some extent, and he was forced to resign. When he resigned, that's when.
Well,
Oh gosh.
Agnew resigned, and so did Nixon, and then Gerald Ford, who was Speaker of the House, became the president.
No, Nixon did not resign yet. Nixon resigned because of Watergate, which was shortly after. That was yet less than a year later.
Yeah, because then Ford was vice president then, right?
Right, and then Ford took over as actual president, and then appointed somebody else. That's somebody else I don't know off the top of my head.
No, Ford. I don't know who the vice president was underneath Ford, but Ford remained, Ford remained in for 2 years, and I think he sought re-election but wasn't able to get in because he was kind of clumsy. He was pretty clumsy.
Let me see here.
Clumsy boy.
It's because he drove a Ford.
And he fell down his flight of air. He fell down the steps of Air Force One numerous times.
I know President Nixon remained president. Vice President was Ford still. FBI investigation found some shit on Watergate, and Ford seeks advice from Hubert Humphrey, Vice President under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Humphrey wrote Ford a letter explaining the responsibilities of the vice president, power they hold, and suggestions on what the vice president should do while in office during a time like this. And then shortly thereafter,
Watergate, yeah.
Right.
And so it just sets up so that's about the only time we've ever had anything like this actually happen.
Right.
And it's important for this to exist because it just sets up the proper mechanisms for a president to be succeeded should they not be able to fill the needs of the office.
It also kind of, in a weird way, says that the president can't just quit.
Yeah, president can't just quit. They have to actually go through this process of resigning.
The last time the 25th Amendment was utilized was when George W. Bush in 2002, he invoked Section 3. He needed a colonoscopy and would be given anesthesia, so he formally gave his power to Dick Cheney during that time.
Oh,
when he was under anesthesia.
Oh, I see. That's interesting.
Yeah, because technically whenever he's inebriated, he can't really...
He's incapacitated.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, so
does that mean that the president can't get drunk?
Okay.
Oh, does it now?
I don't know if the president even has time to get drunk.
He probably does not have time to get drunk.
But that's still so. If the president blacks out, he violates the 25th Amendment. Interesting. That's actually a really cool side bit for that.
I guess you're technically right.
Yeah.
If the president is for whatever reason not feeling like dealing with presidential duties and wants to get hammered, then he technically needs to call his VP and be like, "Hey,
take up the slack there, brother.
Hey, you can have my desk for the next 24 hours.
I'm checking out." Oh man, that's really cool. So then the last tiny bit I wanted to talk about real quick was just the 26th Amendment. This just says reduction of voting age qualifications. It has two sections. The first section being the right of the citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or Senate on any account of age. So I don't know if it was actually determined before then what the voting age was. I had a conversation with somebody about this a couple weeks ago, and we were talking. We didn't know if there was a predetermined voting age before this, or not. And
My guess was if you could afford your poll tax, then you could.
Yeah, because there's been a bunch of things that allowed you to vote throughout the years. Like before, you had to be a landowner, and then
that's how it originally was set up. Yeah.
Yeah, landowner, male, and then they allowed females, or actually they allowed African Americans, and then they allowed females in the early 1900s.
Yeah, with the suffrage movement and stuff.
Yeah, and they got rid of the requirement to own land.
I personally still think that should be a thing. Contrary
I
to popular
think
belief.
I get it. I understand the thought process of it, because you own land, so therefore you're invested in the
well-being of the state.
The well-being of the state. But I still think it's important that everyone gets a vote. I don't necessarily. I think you should be an adult to vote.
I just think I think that there should be a method that promotes people to actually really think when they're voting and do their research, not just willy-nilly vote for whoever's talking on the TV.
Yeah, I definitely. Well, that just goes into the. There's kind of been developed a workaround almost for that, because before, back in the day, back in the 1700s, there wasn't major news outlets and stuff like that, so they had to do their own research. And honestly, I think there wasn't a ton of turnout for the early elections simply because, and that's another reason why the Electoral College was created, was for people that, because information was harder to get a hold of, and back then presidents didn't campaign, so the Electoral College kind of also balanced out the uneducated voters, which would still work today, except the uneducated voters today are a huge margin of people, and the worst part is they think they're educated.
That's the scary part. That's really the scary part. And then just to wrap up, Section 2 of the 26th Amendment, it just says Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. That's it. I mean, it's basically like, yeah, we have the power to do this. So I mean that pretty much covers all of the amendments that have to do with the election of the president, that being the 12th, 17th, the 20th, the 22nd, right? We covered, 22nd, 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 26th. So,
if you needed clarification, there's plenty of it.
Yeah, there's a whole lot written on this that fills in some of the gaps that we have. I mean, like, as we said earlier, we were kind of just flying by the seat of our pants on this one here, because we were originally going to do the 12th, and then we popped up with a bunch of other stuff that was relevant to this, so it's like, I might as well just throw it all in. I mean, I think it's pretty clear why this is important, especially now. We're still in the middle of an election, at least for some bit here. So
we're still in election day.
We're in election month now. Yeah.
God, it's gone on for way too long.
Yeah, but this is all relevant to this. These are all the mechanisms that they set up to get us where we're at now.
Yeah, really. I mean, like, this is just...
It's madness.
This is madness.
This is madness.
This is America.
Yeah, really. I mean, I don't really have much else to add other than that. I mean, I added my bits in as we were going. What about you guys?
I think we covered a majority of it. We definitely could talk about what's currently going on, but I think a lot of people are
overhearing about that.
Or they've done their research, or maybe they haven't. The only thing I'll say is that I don't even know what I'll say, to be honest, because it's at this point of me listening to current politics and following the election and all of that, I'm kind of just like brain dumped
Yeah, seriously.
on it.
Like I literally been doing that for the past couple days. Like I see stuff that pops up for politically right, and I just skip it. I'm so done with this whole thing. That I'm just, like you said, it's just numbing at this point.
Yeah, I'll jump in to conclude it. It's like I was rather politically moderate for the most part up until the beginning of this year, and I literally have consumed more politics this year than I have in the last 10 years of my life. And it's made my brain want to commit seppuku.
Ouch.
Not necessarily. I mean, I wouldn't say it on that level because I've been following politics pretty closely since I was in like 6th grade.
Same.
So it's not necessarily that. It's just the amount of stuff that's going on and the mostly the divide and mostly the uneasiness over this election has I think thrown a lot of us into a closer look.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah,
the divide is just it's absolutely absurd. It's like people are forgetting that everyone's entitled to an opinion, and that's what really hurts me inside.
Well, it's that all is 100. I agree with that all 100%. My thing with it is like seeing people that just blatantly do not do any research at all on their own, like we said earlier, and just go like vote on emotion. Like that's not.
Well, they're told. The thing is, they're told to think a certain way.
Yeah, that's that to me is like
So there's
like bad.
There's two realities forming. Like there's the reality that one side sees, and then there's a reality that the other side sees. I don't personally. I think one side sees more of reality than the other. I'm not saying that the other side is completely unrealistic with what they're saying, but I think the implications that the thing, like, they don't really know what they're saying or asking for.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I could come up with some examples, but I'm not gonna. That would be signaling people out at that point.
If you would like some examples, go listen to our Second Amendment podcast. But with that, I think we can wrap it up.
Yeah, we're good. We covered a lot of info.
Yeah, a ton of info on this one.
Give us a like on whatever podcasting platform that you listen to us on. Spotify, Google, YouTube. We're on YouTube. If you didn't know, we're there. We've got a cool little spinny graphic thing that does stuff. We also have a Discord where you can interact with us if you'd like. You can make fun of us for using not in-person means of communicating, and you can have conversations with us if you'd like, run ideas past us. We'd all really enjoy that.
Roast us. Please roast us. We're open to it.
Yeah, we need constructive feedback. Yeah, but I think that'll wrap us up.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Yeet.